We've got our guests. They are in Abuja studios. We've got first Dr. Emeka Okegu. He's an agri-consultant. He's also the National Chair, Alliance for Social Democrats. And right beside him is Dr. Sam Amadi, a lecturer at Beige University and was formerly of the NERC. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us today on the program. Dr. Amadi, haven't seen how the screening has gone so far. They're going to continue the screening today. What were your immediate thoughts at the end of the day for the first batch of the screening?
Well, first is the now notorious issue of attaching portfolio to nominees. I recall very well, I think in 2007, when PDP was in government, I wrote a letter to the then Senate President, and I went on air to argue that it really doesn't make sense. It's really, to be fair, silly to screen anybody for any position without knowing where they will end up. And this is very obvious. Everybody, apart from those who have criminal or constitutional, and criminal means conviction, everybody is almost qualified to be a minister. So if you don't require a certificate, you don't require more than secondary school to be legislator, to be president, then you don't require more than secondary school to be a minister of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. But the essence of screening is that you could use opportunity to confront people with issues in the past, confront them with possible or potential conflict of interest. So take, for example, if somebody is going to be a minister of petroleum, let's say, and his wife has been a major legal advisor to oil majors, it could become a context in which to ask him probably how he's going to make decisions that are fair, decisions that don't have conflict of interest, decisions that are in the public good if his wife is a major either contractor or legal consultant to the petroleum sector. So the idea of screening is not just to come and, it's like a circus, it's like a show. You know, you come and bow or speak grammar. Assuming somebody loses his voice that day, assuming somebody hasn't got the rhetorical power, but has had studied, you know, experience in various things. So the idea of matching portfolio is not cosmetic. It's actually to bring people, for example, somebody who had probably managed a portfolio in the state as commissioner, and maybe did well, didn't do well. It's a context to define what we do differently. Take, for example, the issue of poverty. The point is very big on that issue of national security. We don't know who's going to be the defense chief in that, defense minister in that list. So if you do know, you could then do some research, see how has made decisions, see the comments has been in the past. And the idea also is not to disqualify them. Apparently, it's difficult to disqualify presidential nominees. The politics of clearance is there, even the US, except where you have a polarized National Assembly. But the real outcome of screening is that those nominees can make undertakings in public. They can say, okay, fine, since my wife, since XYZ, this is how I think I will go about this. And those undertakings are extracted, they become points of advocacy for policy. I'll give an example in the United States of America. When Obama wanted to nominate or nominated Clinton to be Secretary of State, the issue that came up, and in which White House staffers had to extract a written commitment, was as regarding his husband's famous charity work in the Middle Belt. And the question was, in the Middle East, the question was, look, how are you going to manage the Saudi influence? How are you going to manage conflict of interest being a Secretary of State in the United States of America? And the end result was that there was an extraction of a commitment that the Clinton Foundation will declare upfront any pecuniary or no pecuniary interest that comes from the Saudis or such other foreign governments in order to protect the strategic national interests of the United States of America. So this practice, it didn't start with this Senate. It has been on. I wrote this letter. People are complaining. I think it's time for us to understand that this is
okay, Dr. Amadi, let me follow up. Let me follow up on some of what you said before we get Dr. Okegu to also weigh in on this matter. When you wrote the letter, I mean, yes, you also had experience working with the former one-time Senate president. So let us know, what was the thinking at that time, why they thought it was necessary for them to maintain their rule, and then particularly not attaching portfolios, because this argument has been on for a while.
Well, the Senate President shares my view, but unfortunately, we didn't have opportunity to make any nomination. Don't forget that he came midstream. It was after the removal of Mwabara, and so there was no, we inherited ministerial team, and of course, he lasted only one tenure. But he shares that view, just like the idea of, very funny, the very things we did are funny. Take, for example, the idea of right honorable we attached to our speakers. That right honorable is a colonial legacy of the British Parliament reserved for, that has a history. But we'll put it on. Even the issue, I raised the issue with the Senate President, also issue of having police officers behind, police orderlies behind public officers when they're, those are military, or ADC is a PA to the military officer. And so when you become a governor, a senator, you don't have to have ADC working with you. You have a PA. Then you have security people, probably protect. So there are, to be fair to the senators, we inherited a tradition that, and we have the courage to change those things. So the point I'm making now is that this is not to blame the present government, but to say that even when PDP was there, I wrote a letter to the president, I wrote a letter to Yaradua, I wrote a letter to David Mark, and my argument is the same. You are shortchanging public interest. It's not about qualification. Everybody in that team is qualified to be a minister of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Everybody is. But the question is, how there are certain flag points. For example, the issue of economic growth, which is big for this government, and issues of social poverty and conflict going on around the country. We need to know who is coming where, so that we can, like I said before, two things is to go back to their past, confront them with things that could, in fact, under screening, the president all over the world, in the US, for example, have pulled out candidates who were screened because those candidates, in fact, those candidates recused themselves under the heavy weight of confrontation with facts about their past, about what they've said about the industry, what they've said. Take, for example, national security. Today, there's a loss of trust in government because of issues around federalization, whether it's Haidas conflict, whether it's IPOP. Anybody who's going to be the head of defense in this country has to be confronted perhaps with his opinion, his views about coexistence, his views
all right, Dr.
about...
Dr. Amadi, thank you. Let's take this to Dr. Okegu now. Dr. Okegu, what was your initial reaction? Are you satisfied? Are you confident that so far, from what you have heard, that we're making progress? Dr. Okegu, this question is for you. What's your initial reaction to the ministers so far screened?
Okay, fine. I think it's important to establish some conventions here. We need to put a definition to screening. Okay, what do you mean by screening? And then what is a minister to the president? The president had said, I am going to be appointing people I know. Ministers are aides to the president. I understand that before they get to the National Assembly, some background checks are done on them by the SSS. So if what we are doing in the National Assembly today is screening, then I think we're getting it all wrong. Okay? But if what it is we are doing is to present to the National Assembly for the parliamentary pass, people who are going to be aides to the president, then probably we'll have a conversation going. Because what has happened so far is that you have some of them who have been ex-ministers who would have used that podium, that platform, to be able to clearly, explain issues of what they had done and what could have now, engendered the president into reappointing them. But some of them were asked to take a bow and go. Then you also now have this legislative convention that the moment you've been a legislator, you've been a speaker, be it at the level of the subnational or the national, there are rules or conventions that take a bow and go. So wherein lies the screening? What are you screening for? And then if you're going to be questioning, which is what I think is actually what's happening, what are you questioning against? Are you questioning against the person's carrying capacities or carrying capabilities? Then what did the SSS do? And if you're going to be questioning against the person's positioning as a minister, does it make any proper sense for you to now start questioning somebody and then you're not questioning him towards the sector that he might, likely, or he would not even might? Because when you give portfolios to these ministers and then you're questioning somebody on agriculture or on national security, then the questions will be more poised. when you begin to ask generic questions, you really don't get the person's capacity, because what it simply does is it also gives you very generic answers. So for me, I don't, well, like Dr. Sam has said, there's not one of them that is not qualified to be a minister. There's not one of them that does not have the current capacities to be a minister. There's not one of them that does not qualify to be an aide, to the president. So instead of, us saying that we're screening, I think I'll be more comfortable if we say we're presenting the nominees to the National Assembly, for their approval. And then, and probably, let the general public also see, them in person. And then thereafter, you can start issuing letters of appointment.
Right.
When you now give them letters of appointment, we might now ask the National Assembly to now get them back and then begin to now, interface with them on their capacities, on the portfolios they've been given.
Okay, Dr. Amadi, now, while this screening or presenting, as Dr. Okegu said, is going on, Nigerians are simultaneously assessing the Senate, especially because they want to see a Senate or a National Assembly that will check the executive, yes, work together with the executive, but also check, because they're meant to be, there's meant to be separation of powers. So from your opinion, what you have seen so far, how do you think this paints the picture for Nigerians? This is a major assignment for the Senate, and Nigerians are seen to know if this will be a rubber stamp or not. So how do you think this affects that conversation?
Well, I think, to be fair, the Senate leadership, particularly the Senate president, has not left us in doubt as to his own style. When I was an advisor in the National Assembly, we came in the context after which there have been Okadibo, who was apparently very, very confrontational to the powers, the presidency then. We saw Nwabara, who people thought was a stooge, subordinate or subservient. And then when we came, we framed what we call the third way, which is called the co-management style. Meaning, look, we're going to be differential to the executive, but we're going to be very independent in doing the core work of legislation. So, first and foremost, I think it's right for Lawal to say, look, we're going to be a cooperative Senate, National Assembly to the president. That's correct. But I think also it should emphasize independence. And independence means that, and start with their own rigor. So what they have done so far does not point to a change or any exciting times with the National Assembly so far. I think perhaps by act of commission or omission, they have set themselves up to be judged as likely going to be a rubber stamp, which I think may be unfair at this stage. Knowing the intricacies of National Assembly, I think you can't foreclose on this event because the dynamics can change quickly. The opposition party, which is very important in the National Assembly, may kind of push the leadership to change their style and move closer to some sense of much more critical engagement. I don't like confrontation because that's not what they're elected to do. I like critical engagement. So we have seen that so far the opposition is also raising some good questions. During the screening of the Chief Justice of Nigeria, I think the minority leader raised critical questions. Yesterday we saw Philip Adoda raise a very important issue about the status of Abuja, and he is quite right. If Abuja is to be treated, our constitution has inelegance in drafting, but if you say Abuja should be treated like a state, then it means that Abuja should also have the capacity to represent at the federal executive. So you will see this kind of attempt to push the leadership to be less differential, less cordial, and much more engaging and independent in the engagement. But so far, I would say that the management of the proceeding has been too conventional. And that brings the issue around take a bow. I think it's a mockery also on the National Assembly. It portrays them as a group that's only concerned with privileges. So once you're one of us, I mean, it doesn't show any disrespect to ask your former colleagues questions about the work they would do. No disrespect. So this notion that the way to be a senator or to show that we are a united house is that once you're a senator in 1940 or a House of Reps in 1940, once you step in, no matter, even if you're appointed as Chief Justice of Nigeria, they will say, take a bow. That's really ridiculous. So
if I could jump in, Dr. Amadi, my apologies. If I could jump in on that, because, I mean, you've also headed the major agency in government. And if they are coming in, yes, we know the SSS, they do certain jobs, screenings before These persons are eventually sent to the president, after which it gets to the Senate. But concerning the portfolios, in the ministries now, if you say they're all qualified to become ministers, for those who argue that, well, yeah, at the moment, they may not have portfolios attached and senators cannot question them based on where they are going to be. And so they say they have to question them based on the CVs that are submitted against the names of such persons. Now, given the fact that, look, in those ministries, they've got several other people, how much importance then does that mean that, look, if you don't screen you based on portfolios, you may not perform? Because you have some ministers who many people say they are satisfied with, who are returning, they still didn't question based on portfolios. So is it neither here nor there whether or not portfolios are attached?
Well, I think, let me answer that quickly. You see, the whole idea of screening is not, even if we don't screen you, you can still perform. So screening is not an index of performance. There are many officers who are not screened. Some presidential aides are not screened. The executive government is not screened. The chief of staff is not screened. And these are very important positions. But the point is this. If you want to screen, why does the Constitution talk? I'm a constitutional lawyer. Let me say this now. The constitutional design for screening is to create co-management. So the ministerial positions are politically representative. And therefore, the Constitution thinks the president should not be the one who makes that decision alone. So the Constitution gives the National Assembly, who represent the people, the right to inquire into, for example, the qualification is one thing, but also the appropriateness of that person for that position. Again, let's put it this way. I was screened as a chief executive of a federal agency. And to tell the truth, it's much more intense at that lower level. The SSS reports were there before them. My filings were there before them. They asked me a lot of questions about my personality, about the work I've done before as special advisor in the National Assembly, my work as a lawyer. So it's really funny that you could, because they could do that because they look at power and say, electricity, what experience has this guy got to do? If I was appointed, let's say, as chairman of tourism, they ask a different kind of question. If I was appointed as EFCC, probably they ask about my policing skill, they ask about my crime-busting potential. If I was appointed economic advisor, they're probably looking at have I worked in highbrow policies, think tanks in the world to understand the politics of economic management and policy making. So the key point we are saying here is not that, when I say they are qualified, by the way, I don't mean they are qualified to perform. I mean that by definition, if you're a Nigerian, has gone to secondary school, you're a politician, you have worked for the president, and the president likes you, it's a presidential prerogative to appoint. Let's take two examples. Look at the people appointed by Trump and the people appointed by Obama. Obama's appointees for the energy department was a Nobel laureate. And people say, oh, this is academic people. They're going to talk about climate change. We don't want that. They're going to talk about, renewable energy. Trump appointed somebody who didn't have that pedigree, but who has a history of denying the science of climatic change, a history of denying the value of renewable energy, a commitment to gas, electricity, and all those so-called dirty energy. So it's a policy choice. So people who are going to interrogate him, we interrogate him on how fiercely will you defund some of this innovative science program in energy. They know what they're asking him about. They know that they have a sense of what it's going to bring to the table. And it creates political discourse. That's the idea of democracy. Those who oppose will have their day to either caricature, either critique, either find a way to shift his own perception and his own agenda. You see, democracy is a conversation. And so it shouldn't be seen as cut and dry, okay, appoint somebody. No, these debates, and that's why, if you look at screening, they're done by committees. I think they should go back to screen ministers with rigorous committee examination, committee report, and then bring it to the plenary. This idea of watching, rhetoric. Some guys come, they are smart, they can speak well, they speak well, they say, oh, he did excellently well, take a bow or clap. That's not the way to screen public officers. Do it in committee, based on report you filed, based on what your aides have told you, and then that committee takes the report to the plenary and they look at it, they debate it, they vote it. For example, somebody will forget a line, a national anthem, and then you say he's disqualified. Somebody will forget maybe who is the ECOWAS Secretary General or President of ECOWAS Commission, or who state is hosting ECOWAS, it disqualifies him. So it lends itself to frivolities and entrapment. Somebody is quarreling with his senator, perhaps, and then the senator says objection, and they say, these things are not the way we should run a functional democracy in the 21st century. It should
let me bring
knowledge.
in. Yeah, apologies. Let me bring in Dr. Okegu. I'm picking up from some of what Dr. Amadi has said there. From what we've seen now, and speaking about energy, by the way, it leaves the people with little or no option from what they've seen concerning those who have screened. The questioning part for Mr. Uche Oga appears to be the one who everybody may be thinking, look, okay, well, maybe he's the one who's going to go to the energy sector since Dr. Ebikachuku is not returning. So he, so far, is the one who's got that experience and the questioning in that line as well. So isn't it natural that people may think, well, that may be it. But again, they could be wrong because they've seen this scenario before and people didn't end up where they thought they were going to end up. What do you think of that?
Well, I think Uche was at, I think he operated as a businessman in that sector. You have J.D. Abba, who I think he was in charge of crude oil usage or something from Cross River. So I don't think it's only Uche. Truth of the matter is, like I've maintained, what it is we've done, if we want to do an effort or want to do an exercise that can be of some benefit, that can have what you might be able to call outcomes that you can interrogate, there has to be a process. And that process will be first and foremost, let us begin to now put right pegs in the right holes. Now, you cannot begin to now put right pegs in the right holes when you are not pegging that hole or pegging that square against the hole or pegging the pole against the hole. Now, what point am I trying to make? I think we're also forgetting that it's not as if these gentlemen have a tenure of 4 years that is going to be based on contracts that are signing. They're going to be keeping their jobs on the pure prerogative of the president and the mercy of the president. He can wake up in the morning and dissolve the cabinet without any recourse to anybody. It's also important to understand that, and that's why I said that these are all the aides of the president. However, we are at times now where we must be able to look at our country from a more holistic, and comprehensive approach, vis-a-vis making certain that we now get it right. I think it's more important for us to even now discuss how the ministries, within, interface with each other than who the ministers are. Because remember that as political heads, there's also the permanent secretary who is actually, the head of a ministry, who is the chief accounting officer of a ministry. The minister is not. Okay, remember that every other thing that happens in a ministry, all expenditures that happen in a ministry are also done at the level of the directorates. And then you have directors, who also climb, from the ladder. So what's key is that we should be looking at what plans, and I have not seen that yet. Have we been able to segregate, these ministries to be able to say, okay, fine, these are the two most important ministries for now, or that is going to be helping us in building a new Nigeria. And for me, that will be the Ministry of Education, and that will be the Ministry of Science and Technology. You see why I talked about, what we call result-oriented questioning. We would have been able to say, okay, out of all these whole people now, who will be the best, or what will be the best approach to making certain that we now identify the people or the persons who will head these two ministries. Now, the second level of ministries for me, now why have I talked about Ministry of Science and Technology? Because it is the most fundamental and foundational ministry that is going to be getting us out of our woods in our present socio-economic, challenges, if you may. So what's key, Chamberlain, is that it's just not to talk about who the ministers are. It's also to talk about what the ministries are and what they will do going forward. If you had Ministry of Education, like I said, and then you must be able to have somebody who understands that we're no longer in the time where formal education is only used to us. We have over 100 million, people who are unskilled, who probably could have gotten some level of education, but because you have not reached to that zenith, having a secondary school certificate these days does not give you any life skills. Okay? At the best, if you continue to a university, what you might end up is to be able to become an administrator. We must be able to have a Ministry of Education that begins to understand that we need to begin to build skills. And then a Ministry of Science and Technology that begins to now tie to those skill sets. Okay? And then you can take it to the next level where you now have probably, where you have what you call your operational ministries or your job creation ministries that will be supported by these foundational ministries. This is where your Ministry of Agriculture will come in. This is where your Ministry of Water Resources will come in. This is where your Ministry of Lands will come in. This is where your ministry of minds and stay will come in.